Media Matters has been coming out with more clips featuring Tucker Carlson saying questionable things while appearing on Bubba the Love Sponge's radio program. The most recent, though, has to do with comments he made about his own personal wealth and the relationship he has with Rupert Murdoch. Now, look, we haven't listened to the audio of this yet. This just broke, but I will read the transcript of it and then we can have a discussion. So when asked on Bubba the Love Sponge in 2008 how he pays his bills, Carlson replied that he's extraordinarily loaded just from inheritance from my number of trust funds.
That, by the way, is true. I think it's the Swanson. He's a Swanson heir, so he has always been incredibly wealthy.
Man, look at his face in that picture.
I mean, for a guy who's that wealthy, he always seems too concerned.
Or confused. He also says, I'll go out and beat some servants. I'll wrap my Lamborghini around a tree. I'll pick up a kilo or two, you know, just like normal stuff.
So look, there he appears to be joking. So this story broke while we're on the air and we're reading the transcripts to you guys. But he's joking around about how rich he is and how he beats his servants, etc. You can think that that's tasteless jokes, but at least it's a little self-effacing. Now we're gonna get to some terrible stuff in a second, but that part to me was not as bad.
Yeah, so the host asks, you're just a trust fund baby, are you not? And Tucker Carlson responds with, oh, completely. I've never needed to work, yeah. I mean, it's all just the whole cable news thing. It's just like a phase I was going through. Obviously, it was not a phase, and he's probably still joking.
He's joking.
Okay, so let's get to his comments on Rupert Murdoch. In one instance, the conversation on the show centered on Fox chair Rupert Murdoch's decision to pull Sean Hannity from broadcasting at a Cincinnati Tea Party rally in 2010. At that point, Tucker Carlson on the radio show says, I'm 100% Murdoch's bitch. Whatever Mr. Murdoch says I do, I would be honored if he would cane me the way I cane my workers, my servants.
So there, he's still obviously joking, but as a friend of mine used to say when we were growing up, when you're joking, you're serious. So that's, and I always thought, no, not really. Most of the time I'm just joking. But in this case, he's alluding to a deep truth, unfortunately, which is that, and it's not just Fox News, wherever you work at those big cable news companies, there's somebody at the top and there's a directive. I should know, I was on MSNBC and the directive was to be more gentle with Democrats. And I did not listen to that directive. So that's a long story you've probably heard before. In this case, yeah, I know you are Murdoch's bitch. And so when you work in Fox News, there is a certain expectation. Now, Murdoch and Roger Ailes back when he ran it were smarter than the people at MSNBC. So oftentimes they didn't have to pull you aside and tell you directly as they told me at MSNBC, but everybody in the building knows it. If you turn into a liberal all of a sudden, you ain't gonna stay on there. So he's joking, but that issue is serious. Now it gets to the part that I'm most concerned about in this context. I think his comments about Iraqis is way worse, but I wanna read you one more quote here from this. In a 2008 segment, he said, but see, I'm an out of the closet elitist. I don't run around pretending to be a man of the people. I'm absolutely not of the man of the people at all.
Yeah, we know.
See, that part he's not joking about.
Yep.
And so that gets to the heart of, so I debated him at Politicon, and a lot of people think that I am being too kind to Tucker Carlson from time to time. And it's not because I developed a bond with him backstage. Oh my God, we're bros forever. No, I was surprised by some of the things that he was saying. And there is a great question as to whether he is being genuine about that or not. So let me give you a quote from a recent program he did on Fox News, and then I will give you the context of those old comments. So he said, under our current system, an American who works for a salary pays about twice the tax rate of someone who's living off of inherited money and doesn't work at all. We tax capital at half of what we tax labor. It's a sweet deal if you work in finance, as many of our rich people do. Now, see that, he's very right about that. See, that's interesting, and that's different than what every other Republican robot has been saying on Fox News and elsewhere for the last 20 years. So that is why I found Tucker Carlson for a moment to be an interesting person. But if it turns out it's just an act, and back when he was being real with Bubba the Love Sponge, he's like, No, I'm an elitist. I'm not a man of the people. So now he's turned on. Did he actually become in any way a right-wing version of that? And by the way, that could take a pretty ugly turn in the right-wing world. In the left-wing world, when you say, hey, taxing wealth seems to make sense because that's a lot of times inherited, so maybe we should increase taxes on wealth a little bit. That would be our answer. Historically, I'm not saying Tucker's saying this, but historically, the right-wing answer to that bit, the people working in finance are the ones that need to be targeted. You know who they are, right? Whoa, we were talking about doing equitable taxation and you took this in a crazy turn, right? So for the people who are concerned about that, I think you are right to be concerned about it. But now I don't know, and I'm not sure I ever knew, is it an act or is it not an act? I mean, there's so many in the right wing who do an act. Donald Trump, what's his real political opinions? Nobody knows. He's just a showman. He's a troll. Ann Coulter, what's her real opinions? Nobody knows. She's an actress.
She definitely hates immigrants. Like I don't think that she's
the jury's kind of come in on Ann Coulter on immigrants at least.
Right.
She really loathes them.
Yes.
And that gets to Tucker Carlson. Man, when it comes to anyone who isn't white, that loathing comes out. And so he gets most offended when you mention that. But maybe because he's insecure about it for obvious reasons, because he has been saying these things. I mean, calling immigrants dirty, etc. And that's all recent. But now let's go to the Iraq quotes.
Sure.
Because those to me are devastating.
So again, Media Matters is releasing some of this audio little by little, and some of the more recent comments that have been released have to do with Tucker Carlson's thoughts on Iraqis. Take a look.
Iraq is a crappy place filled with a bunch of, semi-literate primitive monkeys. But I just have zero sympathy for them or their culture, a culture where people just don't use toilet paper or forks.
And the way they treat women, I agree with you. Their culture is, but you're in their homeland, and you're over there as an American who they hate, and they want nothing more than the Americans off of their soil. So they're not going to play games.
They can just shut the up and obey, is my view.
So we invaded Iraq on this completely false premise that they had weapons of mass destruction, but they need to shut up and obey, like that comment. And I know that it wasn't Tucker Carlson who made this comment, it was one of the radio hosts, but he mentioned how Iraqis treat women. Okay, but Tucker Carlson was on that very show, on your show, saying some of the most hideous misogynistic things about women, about how they need to shut up, be quiet, and how they like it when you argue with them.
Or put them down.
Or put them down, yeah.
Yeah, so, and there we go again with the constant theme of everyone but the privileged should shut up and know their role, and their role is to basically obey us. So look, there's no excuse for calling anybody monkeys. And Iraqis being Middle Easterners, it's particularly egregious to use that slur. But more important is how uneducated Tucker Carlson is. Because if you look at world history, there are different empires that have had great success at different periods in human history. So the Chinese had a huge reign, the Egyptians did, the Greeks did, the Romans did, and so did the Arab Empire. And so the Arab Empire was ascendant for hundreds of years when Europe was a backwater suffering through the medieval times and the Dark Ages. And so at the time, the Iraqis would have said, oh, those primitive monkeys in Europe, they're so pathetic. Now they didn't say that, or at least as far as I know, but I wouldn't be surprised if some of them did, but they would have been wrong. Right? Because they were just looking at that context of that time. So looking at the context of this time with all the different geopolitical situations, if you reduce it to we are superior and they're semi-literate monkeys who don't use forks, etc., well, you're an idiot. You don't understand any of the geopolitical situations that have gone on in history and that go on today, and you think that you are somehow superior because of what race and place you were born in, which is deeply ignorant.
Look, I don't know if Tucker Carlson is watching this video, if he'll ever listen to what you have to say. I'll play the role of Tucker Carlson for you, and so I'll just do what he would do if you were here. Okay, so to go back to your point about how he might be an idiot, we have numerous examples to, give credit to that argument. Let's go through them.
How could you salvage Iraq at this point?
I don't, it's beyond our control. I mean, if somehow the Iraqis decided to behave like human beings or something.
Remember when we found out how some of those prisoners were treated? How they were degraded, humiliated, how our own soldiers were committing war crimes. Remember that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So he largely did not want to go into Iraq. And basically it was he explained in the longer context of that primitive monkey comment, where he's like, they're not worth our time. Who cares about those monkeys, right? And there, how do you get out of Iraq? Well, if they decide to behave like human beings. It reminds me a little bit of the beginning of Gladiator. I'll do a goofy movie example here. When the bad guy general turns to Maximus and says, people should know when they are defeated. And Maximus says, would you, would I, right? And so he's like, they should know when they're defeated, these barbarians, right? Why don't they just act like human beings and obey us? But that's the mindset, constantly comes back to the same thing about the servants, and women should shut up, and Iraqis should shut up, and they're all monkeys, and they're all inferior. And the only people who wind up, that are left that are superior, are white males, who everyone else should know their role and listen to. So look, when all these stories started coming out, he said, oh, they caught me saying naughty things on the radio. And if it was just joking, like about being Murdoch's bitch or whatever it might be, I would have said, hey man, those are jokes from a long time ago. If he had come out and said, hey, you know what? Come on, obviously I shouldn't have called people monkeys. That's obvious, that's on me. I was trying to joke around and I went way too far. Whatever, I'm not gonna make excuses for him. He's not bothering to make excuses for himself, right? Even, I don't know if that would have been enough. I know saying, no, I don't apologize for any of it means, I guess, that you meant it. In which case, you're a terrible, terrible person. And so everybody should take note of that.
Let's go to the next clip.
White men have, they've contributed some, I would say, like creating civilization and stuff. I think they've done a pretty, I don't know, whatever.
Yeah.
Okay, I mean, but that's
so look,
that's
to say that
the
white
type of
people
stuff that he says now.
I know.
Why are we surprised? He says that on Fox News now. He would say that tonight.
Yeah, look, did white people contribute to civilization? Of course, of course. Did white people create civilization? Equally, of course not. I randomly was looking at the 20 oldest cities in the world the other day because of something my kids and I were talking about. Almost all of them are in the Middle East. Because that's where civilization began, the place where you said they were primitive monkeys. So they've had cities there for nearly 10,000 years, while again, people were starving and filled with ignorance in Europe. Now that it's not because white people were any different than any other human being. We're all Homo sapiens. It's just that the more interaction and trade that the Europeans did, then they got more advanced, and these things have ebbs and flows, right? But this clown of clowns thinks that no, Egypt didn't exist, the Middle East didn't exist, China didn't exist, white people created civilization. I mean, it is the height of ignorance and stupidity.
So I want to get to how Tucker Carlson has addressed this situation. And keep in mind, these are comments that he made last night after the first round of terrible audio was released by Media Matters. And so he remained defiant, even though pharmaceutical company AstraZeneca said that it would no longer advertise on Carlson's show. So he decided to respond to all of this by pushing some crazy conspiracy theory. Take a look.
One day you're having dinner with your family, imagining everything is fine. The next, your phone is exploding with calls from reporters. They read you snippets from a press release written by Democratic Party operatives. They demand to know how you could possibly have said something so awful and offensive. Do you have a statement on how immoral you are? It's a bewildering moment, especially when the quotes in question are more than a decade old. There's really not that much you can do to respond. It's pointless to try to explain how the words were spoken in jest or taken out of context, or in any case bear no resemblance to what you actually think or would want for the country. None of that matters. Nobody cares. You know the role you're required to play. You are a sinner begging the forgiveness of Twitter. So you issue a statement of deep contrition. You apologize profusely for your transgressions. You promise to be a better person going forward. With the guidance of your contrition consultants, you send money to whatever organization claims to represent the people you supposedly offended. Then you sit back and brace for a wave of stories about your apology, all of which are simply pretexts for attacking you again.
Carlson also says, quote, "We've always apologized when we're wrong and will continue to do that, but we will never bow to the mob ever, no matter what." And so he believes that this is just an attack by a leftist mob.
Or Tucker, here's a different suggestion. Why don't you earnestly answer the questions? So I understand that phenomenon exists, and so I'm not one to deny the phenomenon that you're talking about, and it often targets people like Martin Bashir and Ed Schultz, et cetera, on the left, and the alt-right loves to do that. But you don't have to do either or. What you can do is say, these comments were in jest, and those comments were wrong, and I'm sorry I said them, because I actually mean that. Or maybe the reality is you're not at all sorry, you're still the same exact guy. The TYT Plus app is now available on iOS and Android. Download to get more TYT content at tyt.com/app.